Am I sitting in a lawn chair in my own living room because I don't have a couch yet and my big purple chair squeaks too much? Yes. Am I drinking $3 rosé purchased at a Dollar General out of an Epcot wine glass? Yes. Are we here to talk about Nora Roberts? Absolutely yes. 5 to 7 people over the course of many months have commented asking, pleading, begging, just casually asking if I would make a video about Nora Roberts. Now, I will not be making a comprehensive guide because, quite frankly, I don't have the time for that. This woman is a mad woman and has written hundreds of books, and there's no possible way I could have read them all. I mean, I guess I could have, but that sounds hard, and it's tourist season, and I get to do what I want to do. I did find a booktuber who is doing a project where they are reading all of Nora Roberts' books. I will link that video down below if you're interested. This is more of a lackadaisical moment, okay? I'm going to talk about Nora, I'm going to talk about some connections I have found, and I'm going to talk about some Nora Roberts books I plan on reading in the future, and I plan on talking about in the future. Let's talk about the Queen herself, though. Let's dive into a little bit of a wee biography on her. Nora Roberts was born October 10th, 1950, making her a Libra and a baby boomer. Now, I don't know much about Libras. I do know a little about baby boomers. So please, if anyone would like to put 2 and 2 together to make 4, let me know in the comments. What is that like, a Libra baby boomer? She was born in Silver Spring, Maryland, and was raised quite Catholic and quite Irish, which you find in a lot of the settings of her books. A lot of them are set in Ireland, and a lot of the characters tend to be Irish because she's Irish herself, and that's what she likes. She was raised, like I mentioned, going to Catholic schools, and attributes her strong sense of diligence to the nuns who educated her, but also in her Wikipedia article, it said she lied a lot. So is that a Libra baby boomer thing, or does that mean she's just fun at parties, or both? Nora got married to her high school sweetheart and had 2 children, and then in 1979 she was like, I'm gonna write some books. And so she sent a manuscript to Harlequin, who subsequently told her, we already got an American writer, but nice job, I guess. That American writer went on to plagiarize her quite famously. Look it up. It's pretty wild. And in 1981, Harlequin decided that they needed another American writer and picked up her book Irish Thoroughbred, which I have read and which is really bad. She then divorced her husband. In 1985, a man named Bruce Wilder came to her house to make custom bookshelves, and they subsequently fell in love. He actually owns a bookstore called Turn the Page Books, which is very adorable and all in all the sweetest little meet cute I have ever heard. Nora Roberts also has many pseudonyms, but her most famous is J.D. Robb, which is her mystery thriller pseudonym, and she's written 8 bajillion J.D. Robb books. We gotta love that. She really started to gain fame and success in the mid-90s. That's when my mother started to read her, and a lot of people's moms, I think, started to read her and became the household name that she is now. She's had many Lifetime adaptations, and also, little fun fact, Miss Nora hates flying, so she does all of her research online. The other little fun fact that I found that goes back to the diligence point is that she writes 8 hours a day, no matter if she's at home or on vacation. So we love a woman who has a strong work ethic. Is that a Libra baby boomer thing? A lot of people are more aware of Nora Roberts now because of her clapbacks, if you will. She's had many people try to come for her, from her fans getting angry about the casting of her adaptations, her Lifetime adaptations, to younger writers accusing her of plagiarizing. Nora is the queen of not having a social media presence, but writing a searing blog post, which again, Libra baby boomer thing, I don't know. Now, how did I become a Nora Roberts fan? I became a Nora Roberts fan, like many people, through my mother and older sister, and that's what Reagan was talking about when he described trickle-down economics. I am going to be talking in this video about 3 of her series that I have actually completed. I plan on, like I said earlier, reading more of her books and talking about them in the future. For this video, this beginner's guide, beginner's guide to Nora Roberts, let's talk about these 3 series. Nora tends to write under two camps. She writes supernatural romance or she writes contemporary romance. And two of these series fall in the supernatural category and one of these falls in the contemporary category. I'm going to start off with our supernatural books first. I'm not going to talk too much about the plot because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll give you a vague idea of what's going on. So the first series that I'm going to mention is the Three Sisters Island trilogy, which came out in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001 range. And it is set on a small island off the coast of Massachusetts. And the first book follows a young woman named Nell who is running away, having faked her own death from her horrible, evil, abusive husband, and is drawn to this island where she meets the other two main characters. Ripley, the town's deputy sheriff. Yes, there are cops in this book. And Mia, the town's resident witch who also owns a bookshop and gives Nell her first job working at a cafe in the bookshop, allowing her to have economic stability in this town. Now, the three books follow each woman and their romantic journey. It also has a central plot of this long ago curse involving these three women's ancestors who were witches and who founded the island and who also ended up cursing the island, making these three women having to deal with the consequences. The other supernatural series is the Sign of the Seven trilogy, which is set in a small town in our lovely Nora's home state of Maryland, where these three young boys, when they are 10 years old, end up opening up a hellmouth and releasing a demon that some Puritans tried to get rid of in the 1600s, I think around the Salem witch trials. In doing so, this demon decides to rage against this small town every 7 years for 7 days, causing casualties, death, destruction, and a lot of grief and horrible stuff. Now, these three men, now and then when the book starts, are fast approaching another year of the 7, and they are like, I want to get rid of this forever. So it ends up being that this long ago prophecy has them involved with three women who are more connected to this prophecy than they previously thought when they showed up to this town. The first woman, the main character of the first book, Quinn, shows up as a supernatural writer wanting to investigate all of this and ends up falling in love with the main male character of the first book, Cal, and ends up bringing in her best friend, Sybil, who is the main character of the third book. And then a woman named Layla shows up. She feels drawn to this, becomes involved, and becomes friends with these two women, and she's the main character of the second book. So a lot of the similarities between these two series have to do with their structures, meaning that each book kind of has a similar romantic plot. We have two women who happen to both be blonde, by the by, I do believe, are our introductions into these worlds, and they fall in love with two men who are pillars in the community. And then you have the second book, which are our reluctant magic users, two women who are afraid of their supernatural gifts that they have gotten from these long ago prophecies, and they fall in love with sort of sensitive type guys. And then the final book has to do with the matriarch kind of women, the women who are the most connected to their magical powers and connected to their sexualities, and the bad boy guy. You also have a lot of darkness. You can kind of see where the J.D. Robb mystery thriller aspect of Nora's writing comes through in her Nora Roberts books. They can have a lot of really dark themes like abuse, assaults, murder, and violence and death. I will have trigger warnings down below for all of these books if you want to see them more specifically. And you have a lot of darkness, but it's also weighed out with a lot of joy and lightness and coziness. You also have the fact that both of these books are set in small towns, which you can tell Nora loves a small town, and I love a small town too. So those are the supernatural books. Let's talk about the contemporary series that I read. The The contemporary series I read is called the Bride Quartet series, which I think was originally published in the early 90s, and I want to say Nora might have done like a rewrite and was then published again in 2011, 2010. There are 4 books in this series, and it's about 4 best friends who decide to open a wedding business together on their friend Parker, who's one of the main characters' family estate. Her parents have passed away and she has this beautiful estate, and she decides that they should start a wedding business. This book is about Mac. Mac is a photographer. The second book is about Emma. She's a florist. The third book is about Laurel, who's a cake decorator, and then Parker is the wedding planner with the 4th book. These books do not follow the same romance structure as the first book. I think the only similarity is in the 4th book, with Parker being the matriarch and her love interest being a bad boy. That's the most similar, but the other books don't really follow that as much. You could kind of say Mac is as plucky as Quinn in Blood Brothers, Elle and Dance Upon the Air, and that's probably the closest similarities that you would find. Now, I want to talk about how all of these books are connected and why I think Nora Roberts is an immaculate writer, and what I hope is true with the other books I plan on reading. Nora does 3 things perfectly, and that is dialogue, setting, and character. Let's talk about setting first. So Nora has this amazing ability to create communities that feel like Stars Hollow at times. They feel cozy, realistic, yet completely fantastical. The characters know their community members, you interact with them throughout the book. They're not in an isolated world. You really feel like the world is fully fledged out, even though it's a mostly realistic world with some magic in it for the supernatural parts. There's also a real sense of grounded writing. You smell everything that Nell is baking and taste everything she's baking at Mia's bookstore. You feel each holiday that the characters experience like you're really there. You feel them all hanging out together. You feel like every season, every moment feels real, which makes the scary stuff really fun too. And it also makes the books, like I said, incredibly cozy and comforting and joyful. A lot of critics have pointed out that Nora Roberts' writing, specifically her dialogue, is masterful. Nora knows how to write dialogue that feels both real and also heightened, similar to her settings. She will say things like thingy or dealio to make things feel more colloquial and real, but also everything feels quippy and smart and to the point. There's not a ton of references, so nothing kind of feels like it's out of date or like it can be dated, except for maybe like the technology. I really enjoy the way the characters talk to each other. I think it's some of my favorite dialogue in any writing. I love it so much. It's just like easy on the brain, but also a lot of fun. And then finally, character. Her characters are very archetypal, but at the same time, they feel like complete and whole human beings in a very simple and accessible way. It makes them very easy to root for. I will say that I'm really only talking about the female characters. I'm not really talking about the male characters here. She also has an ability to create those communities between the characters. Like, for example, in the supernatural books and even in the Bride Quartet series, not all the characters know each other prior to the first book starting, so you see them grow a community with each other and a found family. If you like a found family trope, you'll find that in a Nora Roberts series. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of brotherhood and sisterhood and camaraderie, and I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. Now, of course, I've got to talk about some of the negative bits. Nora Roberts' books are incredibly heterosexual, and they're also incredibly white. You're gonna read books with majority of the characters being white. She'll sometimes have a character that's of a different ethnic background. For example, Sybil is Romani, or coded as Romani. The third Blood Brothers books, the G word is used in this book. I want to make a big note of that because I don't think that is appropriate. I've not seen any conversation about that rep because the book is so old. Emma in the second Bride Quartet book is Latina, and it's mentioned a little bit, but it's not a huge part of her character. but that's also something to note. There are some side characters who are gay, there's some conversations about it, but all in all these books are quite like old school. They're not conservative, they definitely lean more liberal, but they're not as maybe open-minded as today. So that's also something to note. You're going to be reading quite a dated book. There's also some, in the same way, talk about diet culture, like the first Blood Brothers book. Quinn is quite obsessed with dieting. Another big point about sort of the old school nature of these books, there's a lot of casual sexism, a lot of it, especially the male characters, which is why it's impossible sometimes to root for them. They will describe women by their body parts. One main character, the guy in the fourth Bread Quartet books, describes Parker as legs and says, "Hey, legs." And he also at times sort of like forces himself on her. As the reader, we know that she might want to kiss him, but you don't get the impression through what's actually going on. And the characters kind of just are like, Parker would push you off if she didn't want to kiss you. It's very weird, it's very on the line, and I don't really like it, but something to note. The way the men will talk to each other about the women is very old school. It's very like Matthew McConaughey rom-com from 2000. You also have a lot of like gender stereotypes, like the women are obsessed with shoes and clothing, which is fine. Like, I like shoes and clothing, but it feels very dated at times. But now I'm going to show y'all the next two series I plan on reading and we'll be talking about probably in a wrap-up. The book that I just started is Key of Light. It's the Key trilogy. It's a supernatural trilogy. I don't know a ton about it, but it was published in 2002. And a famous contemporary series of hers is Born in Fire, the Irish-born trilogy, which came out in 1994. So these are both old. And then I forgot, I also plan on reading one of her brand new releases, and that is The Awakening, which is supernatural. I've never owned a Nora Roberts hardback, but here we are. We love that author picture. And these are not all out yet. So going from reading quite old Nora and all of my ideas of Nora being kind of old to reading something brand new will be very interesting. Anyway, I know this video was kind of long, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope it was a good introduction, and I'm excited to read more and talk about more. Thank y'all so much. Have